Hello once again and welcome. This is our yoga morning meditation, the Amitabha recitation. I found that the recitation is easier to practice than the chanting. So we'll go by the recitation. For me personally, the recitation is easier for me than the chanting because I'm not a musician. So I find it easier to do the recitation than the chanting. So I'll go with the recitation. You can go with the chanting if you please. So the recitation or the chanting, any of them, they are both good. But I'll go with the recitation than the chanting. So if we may, let us begin. Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 for Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, 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 Tofo, Amitofo, Amitofo, Amitofo,